Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Dravet Syndrome Foundation for our next educational webinar of 2023. Tonight's topic is about special education and considerations for the Dravet student. We'd like to start by thanking our sponsors for their support of this educational webinar series. Thank you to BioCodex, Jazz Pharmaceuticals, Takeda, and UCB. This session will be recorded and available on demand. There will be time for Q&A, so please feel free to submit your questions to the chat box at any time. I'm Erin Rioyo, your DSF Family Network Liaison. I have a keen interest in this topic because, unrelated to my role with DSF, I am also a pediatric speech and language pathologist and have over a decade of experience working specifically in public schools. I also connect to this topic personally because my 9-year-old son, Leonel, has Dravet syndrome and has been on an IEP since he was 3 years old. Additionally, I volunteer on our elementary school's PTA as the Special Education Activity Chair and Representative and have completed the ARC's IEP Parent Partner Program training here in Washington State. Tonight is going to be full of information, and I will apologetically say with certainty that we will not be able to cover every topic under this umbrella. Please know this is just the beginning, and within our private online support groups and future sessions, both virtually and in person, we will continue to address and explore our students' needs along with your personal concerns and questions. To give you an overview of the content for the evening, we will be discussing U.S. federal versus state laws, IEPs and 504 plans, as well as sharing resources for continued learning and support. Following the pre-recorded presentation, our panel will be sharing their connections to our community and to the field of special education. They are here to support you as you consider your students' current or future educational needs. Please submit questions to the chat box and our panel will do our best to answer them. Again, thank you for keeping your video turned off and your microphone muted. Our presentation this evening was voluntarily prepared by Nicole Bird. Nicole is part of our Dravet parent community and is mom to a 4-year-old with Dravet syndrome. Nicole has been an occupational therapist for over 14 years with pediatrics and most recently in the public school system. Her family currently lives in Louisiana, but both she and her husband are Ohio natives. They have 3 beautiful children, 11-year-old Cab, 8-year-old Gabby, and 4-year-old Mila. This presentation was pre-recorded to ensure Nicole's participation, since we all know how unpredictable Dravet syndrome can be, and particularly how unpredictable 4-year-olds in general can be. Please welcome Nicole Bird.
So today we're going to talk special education and regarding the laws that govern it and to the states. So some things that we're going to discuss are federal laws of special education, state laws of special education, and a great resource known as Wright's Law. So getting into federal laws. One of the most important ones that we have and that we reference a lot as parents, and you will reference if you're not there yet, is the Individuals with Disability Education Act. It's called IDA. This is our nation's special education law. So this governs how states, school districts, and public agencies provide early intervention, special education, and related services from children 0 to 21, and in some states, it's all the way up to 23 years of age. The Every Student Succeeds Act also known as ESSA. This replaces the No Child Left Behind Act. So this main purpose of this act is to make sure that public schools provide a quality education for all kids. ESSA gives states more of a say in how schools account for student achievement. So in some states, they have what's known as your statewide assessments that kids start taking. Here in Louisiana, it's 3rd grade. Other states, it's different. And then this also includes your alternative assessments depending on your child's IQ level. And then this also includes very important information for special education. If you look at bulletin point 4, it's evidence-based and place-based interventions. This is really important, especially for our kiddos. This requires them to make sure that everything is data-driven and that it's proven by research. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. This came before IDA was developed, but it's the civil rights law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability. 504 continues to play an important role in education, and it's for those students who don't qualify under IDA, but still need some accommodations. So 504 is strictly accommodations within the classroom or educational environment. They do not require tracking or very minimal of learning objectives. So if you have questions about this, we can get more into that, the difference between the 504 and the IEP, but just know that it's simply accommodations. The Americans with Disability Act, ADA, this was the first comprehensive declaration of equality for people with disabilities. This protects the civil rights of people with disabilities in all aspects of employment, public services, such as transportation, and guaranteeing access to public accommodations, such as restaurants, stores, hotels, and other buildings that allow public access. So one thing that we want to remember as it relates to education, if your child is having issues accessing the public environment around the school, if it receives public funding of some sort at all, they violate that act. So for instance, if there is a 2-story building and your child has a class upstairs and they don't have an elevator for your child to get upstairs, may it be your child's in a wheelchair or stairs are just not safe enough for them to climb, they have to accommodate them at some time, whether they bring the class to them or they input an elevator. So we can get more into that with questions that come. The Assistive Technology Act, this is huge for our kiddos, I believe, and for others. But this is one that it improves the access and function to those with a disability across multiple settings. This can be as simple as low-tech to high-tech services and devices. If you don't know of the options, please seek your school district's AT liaison. If you need help, we can help you do that. Also, your state has an AT liaison as well. And this website down here gives you more information on this act, but also has links to state liaisons and how to access those programs. This is related to education and outside of education. The Free Appropriate Public Education, also known as FAPE. You'll hear this a lot in regards to referencing the educational laws. It's known as the Free Appropriate Public Education. So the 504 regulates that and requires that each qualified person with a disability who is in the school district's jurisdiction, regardless of the nature or severity of the person's disability, so they have access to education. Like it states, these 3 points, you need to make sure you understand who's entitled to FAPE, the appropriate education definition, and what free education definition means. This link, also a federal link, will give you all that definition and more. But the bottom line is students with disabilities have a legal right to receive free appropriate public education. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDA. It's broken into 4 statutes, Part A, Part B, Part C, and Part D. And this kind of outlines some of the insurance, the state insurance as well, as far as like Medicaid and Medicare. They kind of coexist with programs and different stuff. But bottom line for Part A, it's called general provisions. That's when we reference a child with disability versus pause. Okay, so
this meeting is being recorded.
Okay, like I said, IDA is made up of 4 statutes: Part A, Part B, and Part C. Part A, this part is the purpose. It explains the purpose and the complete outline to everyone's roles in educating and providing to meet the child's needs with a disability or the individual with a disability. Part B is the assistance for all children with disabilities. This is where we're going to spend most of our time as parents, because it regards to education. This is where that individualized education plan is outlined, is in Part B. In Part C, that's infants, toddlers, and toddlers with disabilities. This is known as your early intervention area. So most states have an early intervention. They're called early steps, an IFSP, which is an individual family service plan. And remember, an IEP is education, an IFSP is more of a medical based intervention, and that promotes family training within the home. With Part C, if you know the program of your state, sign up and get your child evaluated. This is great to have, even a baseline, whether they qualify or not. Just moving into Part B. So Part D is known as the National Activities to Improve Education of Children with Disabilities. This part outlines how the federal government allots funds to every state to support the education and training of teachers and children or individuals with a disability. So this is basically the federal government saying, states, you have this amount of money to spend to educate and provide resources, whether that's your educating the special education teachers, therapists. It also could be a mentorship, team teaching, integrating technology. A lot of this is data driven to support learning outcomes, communication with parents. It could be a parenting center that's local to you as well, that's funded under Part D. So within IDA, we have Part B, which is where the IEP or the individual educational plan is governed. And then under that Part B, it lays out and it breaks down everything that follows an IEP, whether that's from eligibility to how evaluations are conducted, how plans are placed, settings, procedure safeguards, how they enforce the IEP, what administration's role is, what type of programs, and then there's also a bit of information about preschool grants that the federal government allows. We as parents will spend a lot of time breaking these sections apart regarding the federal and then comparing it to our state laws. They vary greatly between federal and state and between state to state. So we need to make sure that we understand the overall federal role. You know, they basically are the hub. So they are going to tell us everything what states are required to do. And then the state's going to take that and take it a little bit further and say, you know, they told us, they gave us the big umbrella. Now we're going to break down into our state and then within districts. So with all that information all thrown out at you at one time, let's go ahead and take a little break and write down your answer to this question in red. What has been the most challenging part of your child's individual educational plan or program, an IEP? So all the information that I've given you so far is a lot, and it's a continuum for sure of education. There's all aspects of it. I want to make sure that we answer every question that you possibly have, and really understand what the gap is, whether it be, your district's not understanding, or you're not understanding what the district is asking, or needing a compromise. My whole purpose is not to share my expertise, but more give you as the parent the full-time caregiver the confidence you need walking into an IEP. I want you to be an active member of your child's team and know that you have a right, your child has a right, and that you're just a team player in their education. I mean, just think about it. We'll spend from year 3 all the way till they're almost 23 in some states. So this is a huge part, and it's reviewable at any time. And we can also, it has to be reviewed yearly on top of more. So we're going to move into understanding how some federal laws differ to state law. So within the federal law, it talks about eligibility for special education. So the federal law outlines 13 types of disabilities. State law takes, one section and says, in order to qualify in our state, for example, a specific learning disability, you have to score this level of IQ. I'm sorry. And so, although the federal law outlines those 13 disabilities, the state has the ability to make more specific qualifications. Under IDA, we have that free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. The federal law says you have to have a continuum of placements, no matter what, from self-contained to inclusion classes. State law takes that, divides it up to their districts and say, all right, you have to have it across your district, whether it's a self-contained to all inclusion classes. And they have to provide that in the least restrictive environment and provide special education in several types of placements. So your district may have 5 schools, but of those 5 schools, each school may have a different setting or placement of classes, but they're still following the federal law. So it all depends on how your state law outlines that fate and least restrictive environment. Under federal law, early intervention, it's discussed that it's a developmental delay or specific health condition that qualifies you. What the federal law allows the state to do is say, under the state law, we're going to tell you what a delay is defined as, whether it be a score on an assessment, or we are going to do, the eligibility to pay for certain services. Personally, on my experience, my daughter was able to get 5 different service providers. Currently, after 4 years now, they've pushed it back. The state of Louisiana has pushed it back, so you only can receive 2 services. So it all depends on funding and what's available and how your state allots for that. The next one is age of eligibility. So federal law says you must provide students with disabilities who are in school until the age of 21. You have to provide education services. That's the federal law, till 21. Now, states can choose to limit or extend the eligibility. And so that eligibility is the big thing that we're going to look at when you look at it compared to the federal law to your state law, what your eligibility states. For some, they cut it off at 18. Others, they provide services to 21. In some states, for example, here in Louisiana, which is where I'm from, they take it all the way to 22, 23, depending on the district. Transition services. Federal law states we got to start paying in for transition services after high school, starting at age 16. For Massachusetts, under their state law, they start at 14. As an occupational therapist, I say you need to start in 3rd grade. So everybody's different, but as far as laws, Federal says 16, so make sure your state is doing that and planning on that. That's a whole nother sheet that attaches to that IEP. Under some states, it's earlier. Some it cannot be later though, no later than 16. So looking into state laws, we all live in different states and every state interprets that federal law a little differently. So know that not one is alike. They could be very similar, but we would have to dive in and look at it differently. So what I've done here, this big red button, it links to a Google document. It's going to look like this. It has all 50 states. And attached to the state across is your special education law for your state. You click on it and it's going to give you all the statutes under your state. Links to the offices. It's the same for getting a hold of people in your state office. So if you have any questions or if links don't work, please let me know. The last resource is Rights Law. This is a website and it contains a lot of information regarding the special education law and how special education is delivered in all aspects of the IEP and IFSP. So it takes that whole IDA and breaks it apart. There's examples of federal cases that support all areas of special education. They have links for resources locally to your state. You click on your state and it gives you resources for educational lawyers if you go that route. I need to go that route. There's nonprofit organizations and there's advocacy assistance for the entire process for students and parents. Please familiarize yourself with this website and resource. It's going to tremendously help you. You can post questions. The individuals that run this will discuss back. There's courses you can take as a parent to understand IDA federal law so that you understand your state law even more. So the last is all these cited resources. This is not my information that I put out here. This is information from the federal government to the states. There is a couple parent centers on here. They're known greatly for advocacy and helping parents navigate that IEP process. I wanted to share all these resources with you so that you have access to it and the ability to look at it on your own. So with that being said and all this information in front of you, let's go ahead and talk about everything that we can do for you, and we can share our stories and maybe help everybody else out.
Sorry, I'm just finding my script. Thank you, Nicole, so much for sharing. Oh, let me scroll down. Thank you. Again, thank you, Nicole, for volunteering her time, her experience, and her expertise to educate and empower our community. Nicole would like to make her slide deck that she prepared available to those participating in this webinar, so we will make sure to pass it along. Before I introduce the rest of our panel, I'd like to highlight and add additional emphasis to a couple of subtle points Nicole made. I very cheekily entitled this, Minding Your P's and Q's. P is for partnership. Remember that you, the parent, are part of this team. It can be incredibly overwhelming to gather in meetings with numerous educational professionals, but you are there as the expert on your child. And most often you are there to educate the team about Dravet syndrome and the impact on your student. On our website, under Caregiver Resources, DSF offers an educational brochure titled Patient Safety and Accommodations in the Educational Setting, and it is available in English and Spanish. If you are just getting started with your student special education journey, this can be a great tool to use when you make the initial referral. Even though he has been on an IEP for close to 6 years, I included this brochure at the start of the school year to remind my son's team about the adverse impact of Dravet on his daily life and on his educational performance. As part of this partnership, I feel it is important to presume best intent by each member of the team. As a professional, I've been included in many adversarial cases. No matter what part of the country you reside in, it's no secret that the special education system as a whole can be challenging and full of conflicts. If this is your first time navigating the system for your child, it is understandable if you are nervous about the outcomes. My hope is that when the team focuses on partnership and each member presumes best intent for each other, conflicts are more easily resolved. P is also for pride. Be proud of yourself for all that you've navigated on this journey. No matter how difficult it might be, it is important to give a clear picture of challenging experiences so your team can best understand how to meet your students' needs. When preparing for this presentation, Nicole and I had a really great conversation about how she documented her daily caregiving for Mila for well over a week just to demonstrate how significant Mila's needs were and to best advocate for necessary services and accommodations such as nursing at school and a one-on-one paraprofessional support. Be proud of your student and share their strengths and their skills with the special education team. As it does, this process most heavily focuses on the disabilities, delays, and deficits of the student's skills so that the necessary services and accommodations can be identified. However, it is each team member's responsibility to identify strengths in each evaluated area as well. When this process feels heavy, do not lose sight of those celebrations, whether milestones or inch stones. P is for paperwork, and oh boy, there is a lot of it. There is absolutely no right or wrong way on how to best organize it, but I recommend that you find a process that works for you. Some families like to keep paper copies and binders. Some families like to keep digital records. Think about what works for you and take the time to read through and question these documents. You also have a responsibility to provide paperwork to the team. You should make sure to include your student's seizure action plan designed by their neurologist and any other relevant documentation. For example, when we initiated a referral for my son at the age of 3, he had just had a huge developmental regression due to seizures and spent the summer receiving rehab services in speech language therapy, occupational therapy, and physical therapy. By providing these reports, I was able to give a clear picture of his skills and frankly speed up the evaluation process. The final P's are patience with the process. While I'm primarily speaking about the length of time allowed to complete an initial referral, this is also in reference to the length of time your child may be able to access services from preschool through adult transition services. If your child is not yet receiving special education services, you can begin by making a referral in writing. If your child is not yet even in public school, you can make this referral to your neighborhood elementary school or your school district special education department. While we are primarily addressing public schools this evening, even if your child attends a private school or is homeschooled, if found eligible, your student can still access special education services through public schools. I like this guideline from Washington State's Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction, also known as OSPI. You can see if your own state's Office of Public Instruction has one that is similar. Once you submit that written referral, the school district has X number of days, commonly school or business days, to determine whether or not to evaluate your child. It will vary across states, but in Washington State, this is 25 school days. If a determination is made to complete an initial evaluation, you must provide your signed informed consent to have your child evaluated. Based on the date of that signature, the school district has X number of days to complete the evaluation. In Washington State, this is an additional 35 school days. Once the evaluation is completed, the results of all areas assessed are reported and your student's eligibility is discussed. I say discussed in all caps because the team will make recommendations for services and accommodations and placement, but this should be a discussion with your entire team without unilateral decisions being made. Assuming your child is eligible for special education services under one of the eligibility categories Nicole presented, you must again give your signed informed consent before moving on to the IEP process. In Washington State, the IEP team must convene within 30 days. I don't believe those are actually school business days, but 30 calendar days to review the IEP and begin to implement services. When you add all those days together, it can take up to 3 months. Be patient, but stay informed and keep your team informed about any changes along the way. This might include seizure activity, medication changes, frequency of doctor's appointments, as well as any changes in developmental skills and behaviors. This particular guideline also includes the mandatory annual IEP reviews and triennial reevaluations, although those reviews and reevaluations can also happen more frequently if necessary. Finally, the cue. Questions. Ask them. You deserve to be informed. As cliche as it sounds, please remember that special education is a service and not a place. Just like Dravet syndrome is a diagnosis and not your whole child. Dravet syndrome does not dictate nor guarantee services, accommodations, or placement. It is up to the whole team to discuss and designate those individualized needs. As I started out saying, we apologetically, with certainty, are not able to cover everything tonight. If you have questions related to my or Nicole's presented information, please do not hesitate to contact us. I can be reached at Erin@dravetfoundation.org, and Nicole can be contacted at nicolerlee.ot@gmail.com. Once again, please feel free to add any questions to the chat box, and we will do our best to answer them this evening. Again, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, BioCodex, Jazz Pharmaceuticals, Takeda, and UCB. We appreciate your support. Now, on to the rest of our panel, as we continue to discuss considerations for the Dravet student. Kristen Wicketts is the district nurse for a large Central Texas public school district. She has a bachelor's degree in nursing with a minor in public health from New Mexico State University. She is the Region 13 Texas School Nurse Organization Regional President and the Nursing Peer Review Chair. As the district nurse, she is responsible for leading the district's health services team. This includes developing safe protocols, advocating for a whole child approach, inclusion for all students, and motivating and engaging a high-performing clinical workforce that is needed to support the increasing health acuity and student population of a fast-growing public education district. Above all, she is a mother to 4 and an auntie to a Dravet warrior. Crystal Ferguson is a native of North Carolina and has worked as a teacher and administrator for over 16 years. She currently serves as Dean of Special Education and Intervention. She and her husband also own 2 local businesses. Nicole finds that even as an educator and an entrepreneur, her most challenging yet rewarding assignment has been that of being a mother. She is the proud mother of 3 unique and amazing sons. Her oldest son, Jordan, is 17 and was diagnosed with LGS around age 8. Since then, their family has embarked on a journey that is changing their lives. Kristen and Crystal, we appreciate that you are both able to join me, Nicole, and our Dravet community here today. Welcome. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen here. And again, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat box. Thank you for staying muted with your videos off, but welcome to our panel. I've given introductions. Nicole's given a lot of content, but Kristen, why don't you tell us a little bit about, again, your special education connection and your connection to our community, And any other thoughts or considerations that our Dravet community might consider in the special education process?
Hi, everyone. Like she said, my name is Kristen. I am the district nurse over a special education district. So I sit in a lot of ARDS, IEP, and 504 meetings. My connection to the Dravet community is, as she mentioned, I have my sweet niece, Junie, who has the diagnosis of Dravet. And I just want to be here to partner with this foundation and help guide and give any kind of input and direction and advocacy I can when you're sitting in those meetings. I'm a mother of 4. I do have a child that has an IEP, is in special education. So not only on the nursing perspective, but as a mother, I've been in those meetings. They're intimidating. There's a panel of people. They're talking about your baby. So I know from a mama heart how hard that can be. And if there's any way I can support, I'm happy to do it. Things I want to touch base on, the P's and Q's that Erin mentioned, those are perfect. The patients, it's hard. It's a hurry to get your kid in there and get the support that they need and they deserve. But the partnership is huge. That's wherever you can. I encourage you to, as soon as you can, make a connection with your campus nurse or your school nurse if you have one early on, even before these meetings start. Typically, they're a wealth of information. They have been in plenty of IEPs and ARDS, and they can also help you advocate for what kind of services and accommodations you need. And they can also let you know what they can do on their end on the nursing side of things to support you and your child. Paperwork, there's a lot of it. Your seizure action plan, make sure it's up to date. Make sure you have that with you. In our district, we have a seizure action plan. We have an IHP, which is considered the individual health plan. And you and the nurse actually put that together. And it describes your role as a parent and your responsibilities. And it describes the nurse's role and their responsibilities and how they're going to have a successful and safe school day. And then, of course, your seizure action plan. Just make sure it's up to date. And as things change, just communication is also huge. Just communicate, and advocate for your kid. And hopefully and you'll get the support that you need. Not all districts are created equal. I'm very fortunate to be in the one that I am. And like I said, it's a special education destination district. So we really pride ourselves and focus on serving our special education students.
Kristen, I do have a question for you that's come in through some of the questions earlier. Let me find my nursing question. My school says that only the nurse can give rescue medicine. Is this true?
It actually depends on your state. In Texas, that's not the case. In Texas, our nurses within their scope can delegate that administration of that medication as long as they provide proper training and skills to that individual they're delegating that to. So it's all going to be state-based.
And who are some of those designated individuals? Who might those be?
Right. So typically in our district, we have the principal delegate staff members that they feel are appropriate to administer those medications, whether it's an IA, a paraprofessional, a clinic health aide, or the classroom teacher, depending on the size of the classroom. But those are principal delegated tasks. And then the nurse is informed and she'll provide that training in those individuals to make sure they feel competent on providing that medication and when it's appropriate to provide it.
And again, I'll just repeat what you said. It's going to vary across state and maybe even across different districts and within the state.
Correct.
Kristen, thank you so much. Crystal, you're joining us today as both a professional and a parent too. Can you share with us a little bit about your connections and thoughts you might have for our Dravet community?
Yes, and thank you for letting me join in with another rare seizure group. Jordan started at 3 with an IFSP with the early intervention, and so he's 17 now. So I've been able to be in the role of parent in IEP meetings. I was a teacher for 6 years. And so I was bringing the teacher side of things to the IEP meetings, and then also an administrator. So I just wanted to be able to share the different perspectives, because oftentimes I think as parents, we can come into it thinking that this is a contentious relationship in which, as a parent, I'm trying to get all of these supports for my child and the school is trying to stop that. But I think when it's done well, everybody is respecting that you're coming with different expertise. A parent is the expert of their child, historical expert on that child. You know everything that the child has been through, and you love that child more than probably than life itself. So your perspective as a parent is so necessary. But then also the classroom teacher is going to be able to say, these are the classroom expectations. And, you know, you may think that your child is way below everyone, but maybe they're kind of performing with the rest of the crew. So just getting that classroom teacher's perspective, I think, is also important. And especially when it comes to accommodations, which types of accommodations would be helpful in a 4th grade class or 3rd grade or middle school. And then just the LEA rep, the administrator, I think brings the kind of that big picture to be able to say there are several supports in place. What is the least restrictive environment that we can offer here? I think oftentimes we think more is always better. And when you think about the least restrictive environment, it is important to consider what are the supports that are available at a school. I used to think that it was an IEP or nothing. But there are intervention programs, there is a health plan, there are behavior plans, there's a 504 plan, and none of those require you to have an IEP. So I just want to encourage parents that even if your child does not qualify for an IEP, don't think that there's nothing else out there to support him or her.
Thank you, Crystal. I really appreciate all that you contributed. I'm going to turn over. We do have a couple of questions, and I see that we are 16 minutes out from ending, so I want to make sure we get to these. We'll do our best to answer these. Actually, I'm going to stop. Nicole, welcome back.
Thank you.
Do you have any other thoughts that you wanted to add? You shared so much great information for families to be able to either get started with or to help guide them for the rest of their students' process. What other thoughts or considerations also come to mind when we're talking about our community here?
I mean, personally, when I go through it, I kind of looked at it as, you know, what doesn't my district understand? What are they not going to understand with this type of, you know, disorder? And so a lot of it was things that accommodations they've never applied to with, you know, a 4-year-old, or maybe it's a health plan or a discussion of, hold on.
Pausing for a moment for some technical difficulties, and
okay,
welcome back.
Sorry. So, you know, just thinking, a lot of times for me, for Louisiana, the health system, you know, that health law and that nursing law, they really didn't understand their role because they've never had to do it. And so for our district, it was really showing them, like, this is what's covered under an IEP. This is how it's done as far as the federal law. And then I looked at the state law. I met with the state nursing board and really looked into that. And then they supported me and showing our district, this is how you carry it out. This is how it will be applied. And so for me, I would just say, you know, just making sure you understand your laws, because a lot of times as a parent and as a professional, we go in asking for things or requesting things. And sometimes it's either never been done, or it's something that they don't feel that is covered under IDA and that they have to provide. And typically, you know, there is some collaboration that can occur. And like you said, just talking. I think that's the most important thing ever, is to talk and make sure you ask as many questions as possible, because everything that, you know, they say they can't do, there is a statute, a law that says that why they can't do it. And if they can't provide that, then, you know, there's that collaboration that needs to happen.
I'm going to turn this over to one of the questions we have now. and see how we can help guide this family. Our most challenging part has been the implementation. Our most challenging part has been the implementation. She requires nursing as a related service, and they have not provided a nurse in order for her to attend one day in 4 school years. They require me to provide nursing services to serve her at home for home hospital services, but will not allow me to provide the same service in the school building for her to attend her least restrictive environment because I do not have a nursing degree. This is a challenging question. It does sound as I'm not sure why they haven't provided the nursing in the 4 school years. Kristen, is this something you might be able to speak to a little bit?
I can try. Not knowing what state or where they're from, it makes it a little more difficult. I can tell you what we do in our district is we allow families, private duty nurses to attend school with the child. They get vetted through our system. They do a background check, fingerprints, all the things. And once they sign a contract, knowing how, their expectations when they're in our school, they're allowed to attend school with that student. Now, I understand getting a PDN is really, really hard right now. So I have worked with our special education and our HR team, and I have advocated to let parents come in place of a PDN because they know their kids the best. And if we can vet them through just like we do our PDNs and have a contract put together where they understand their role and their responsibilities, and then partner with the nurse. We're fortunate to have an RN on every single one of our campuses. We have 49 campuses and we have an RN on every campus. But the RN cannot provide one-on-one, right? We can provide scheduled nursing services. And then if there's one-on-one, if there's not a PDN there to provide that, there's tasks we can delegate to paraprofessionals. And we will do that if possible. But like I said, with the PDN shortage and nursing shortage in general, I had to advocate for our school district to allow parents to with their students. They know their kids the best, right? So if a parent has the luxury of being able to do that and it gets these kids in school, and the RN can partner with that parent and provide scheduled nursing services as needed, and any type of emergency care, they can partner with the parent if there's emergency care needed at school. That happens here. I'm heartbroken to hear that hasn't happened in where you're at.
I am too. And I'm seeing that Tanya chimed in. She's they've not been able to hire a nurse. They're in North Carolina and they do not have a home nurse. So it is mom providing the care. Tanya, maybe this is something that Nicole and I can assist with continuing offline too, but it sounds like you've tried to go to school with them and they're not allowing you to go because you don't have a nursing degree. So I think that this is something for a continued conversation, because I don't think that we can put that answer fully out there for you tonight. But you're right in that they should be providing one for you.
Yeah, we have to look into laws and everything for that area, for state and district.
It depends on the state. In Texas, school nurses aren't required in schools. So that would be their argument, right? We're just fortunate we do have them, but we need to know those laws in North Carolina in order to advocate fully.
Absolutely.
Crystal, is that something that you can speak to as far as knowing nursing laws, or?
I know that in North Carolina, I'm in North Carolina, and I wasn't sure if I understood the question. So she's eligible for nursing services. They just cannot find someone
cannot hire one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I could just say would be to recommend some certain places that I know that we've been able to find private duty nursing for my own child. But yeah.
Tanya, let's see if we can follow up with you offline to see if we can assist you with that as well. Again, this isn't necessarily something that we automatically are going to have all the answers to, but hopefully with our resources, we can pull together some tips for you. I see another question here. I have been begging for a one-on-one for my first grader due to some behavior issues and severe developmental delays. Is there a secret to getting one? I know the one-on-one is a big topic in our community, both for what you're mentioning, Serena, the behavior issues, the severe developmental delays, but also the seizure safety. And that is how I can speak to our personal experience. The reason why my son has a one-on-one, and he's not a nurse, he is a paraprofessional, is primarily for the seizure monitoring and seizure safety. I can tell you, even at this time, Leonel does not have daytime seizures, but with Dravet, that is never a guarantee. And he is having seizures nearly every morning before he goes to school. So it does impact his behavior, and it does impact his ability to follow along with the rest of his group. When we started the process, we took a supportive letter from our neurologist, and we just had a big conversation with this was back in preschool. We had a big conversation with the team, and just how for safety reasons, there always needed to be eyes on him. So we had a plan in place where even in preschool, he did not have a quote unquote one-on-one, but they did put an extra adult in that room. And there was always someone at that time who was in charge of monitoring him. And we were able to determine who was in charge by whoever had the walkie-talkie. So they knew that if they had the walkie-talkie that led to the nurse, they were in charge. And it took a lot of data. It took a lot of collecting data of why that one-on-one was required. It's not just, it would be nice to have this, but it would be, he has this many seizures on these days. He will wander away from the group this many times, and just looking at those different points. So it's not just a nice recommendation, but we had that data to support for getting the one-on-one.
I just piggyback on that, because I just submitted a justification for a one-on-one parent, got denied after collecting 3 months of data because we hadn't implemented the behavior plan long enough. So it can be very difficult. Sometimes that process can go faster, especially if you have life, some critical or needs, especially like, for instance, an incident that happens at school. Unfortunately, that speeds up the process, whether that's behavioral or health related. My son did have a one-on-one, but it was after an incident behaviorally that he did injure a student. So I'm just saying that there is a long process. It does speed up if there is a critical need.
Kristen, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple key words to use when you're having these conversations is a safety plan. Along with his seizure action plan and their IHP, their individual health plan, safety plan is a triggering word. I've lived in 5 states, right? So we need a safety plan in place. And if that means your student needs a safety plan because they need that one-on-one to keep them safe, to keep students around them safe, because behavioral outbursts are they're unpredictable and they just happen. And to avoid something happening and then having to rush into putting a plan in place, that's a really strong word you can use, is you'd like to know what their safety plan is for your student. And then educational minutes, right? That's a triggering word in the education arena. I want to make sure my child has access to their educational minutes, but I also don't want my child to disrupt anybody else's educational minutes. And having a one-on-one and a safety plan in place is going to allow for everybody to access their educational minutes to the full extent when they're at school. So those are just some triggering words that get people's attentions when you're talking in these meetings.
Yeah, I would say the only thing to add is just making sure they're having the right data points that they're taking. Just like Christine and Crystal said, like, you need to make sure that they're targeting the correct behaviors that, and understand why they're not providing that one-on-one. If you understand their reasoning why, then we can, really hone in of like what we need to target going forward.
Excellent. I want to make sure we get to a couple more of these questions. I let's see, that one was about one-on-one. I'll read it just to see if there's more to add. I'm struggling with our school district understanding the severity of Dravet syndrome and the need for a one-on-one. How can I get them to understand that my son has more difficulties that need to be addressed besides seizures? So hopefully that we just shared will help address that as well. And using that brochure, using anything from our community, from that Dravet Syndrome Foundation has put together, might also be helpful, just again, for educating them on something that they may not have ever heard of before. We have a question: what if I don't agree with what they are willing to offer? How do I appeal that? Do I need an attorney? This is, it could come at many different places. Nicole, why don't you go ahead and chime in there?
I would say the easiest one to do is in writing at your IEP, you decline, and you'd specify exactly what you decline and what you're proposing. And then after that meeting, you send an email with exactly the same script to all your members and requesting that reconvene date. Whether it's declining a service minutes, you would like more, or declining a placement, why you decline it. And then, that collaboration goes through. You have that appeal process. There's no reason to jump to an attorney until you get to the point where, there's just no collaborating on either side. There's no movement after, several meetings.
Crystal, anything else you might add to that? I know being in as the Dean of Special Education and Intervention, you might hear about things a little bit more like this. Any other thoughts there?
I would agree with what Nicole said. I would start with attempting to go through the IEP process with the IEP team first. And then if you can't, definitely look at your parent rights handbook and follow the necessary step.
Excellent. I'm going to check here. Nicole, our daughter is about to enter 3rd grade. You mentioned that you would begin transition planning in 3rd grade. So what does this look like at this age? And where do we even begin with that? And as Meredith has asked that, I realize my son is also going into 3rd grade next year. So ditto for me.
Yeah. So as an OT, I look at it more as their objectives, depending on their placement and what, where their placement in school. Some teachers are willing to kind of accommodate that, but it's life skills. It's those simple life tasks that you want them to be able to complete independently, but also do it among the school day. So, those are things that I could probably get into a lot more on a one-on-one basis. But, for example, with 3rd grader, it's just managing their own backpacks. Are they able to manage their own backpack? If not, what kind of system can we put in place? And that's an easy OT objective if they have OT services. If they don't, that's something that the special education teacher can do under self-advocacy. It's really those self-advocate goals of, can the student request help when they need help, or can they seek guidance, or, seek those assistance levels? And that's where you want to get them to. Some schools don't really, they want to wait till that form is applicable by state, when it's that age group, but you can integrate it through your objectives, through the IEP objectives easily by 3rd grade.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nicole. With that, I'm just going to remind everyone, we are not going to be able to cover every single thing in the special education umbrella. It's a huge umbrella, and many topics fit under it. We are going to keep looking for your questions in our online support groups and chime in when we can, sharing our experiences. We are going to also, at our next heart-to-heart sessions, which is our our last Monday of the month, we are just going to continue talking about IEP needs and services. So check our events page on our Dravet Foundation website and join us for one of our heart-to-heart sessions. And we'll be there to, I will be there to help my best to answer any IEP, special education 504 kinds of 504 plan questions that you might have. But with that, we want to just give a very big thank you again to Nicole for her presentation, and to Kristen and Crystal for joining us tonight. And I will stay on just to make sure that I covered all of the chats, but at this time, I want to say thank you to everyone for coming tonight, and good night.